the biggest issues plaguing modern men is that the vast majority of them lack a tribe of other virtuous, trustworthy, masculine men who gather for the sole purpose of improving themselves and their lives on a daily basis. Most men simply float through space, working a dead-end job, only to go home to a nagging wife or girlfriend that doesn't respect them. Their friend circles are nothing but fat, low testosterone losers who are more concerned with what sports teams are playing this weekend and what bar they're going to watch the game at. If these men are lucky enough to unplug from the comforting lies that modern society sells them and decide they want more out of life, they look around and realize they need to get into a better room. That's where a private community of men chasing excellence comes in. Men in our community have all committed to being the best versions of themselves that they can possibly be. They willingly run toward challenges, knowing that pushing themselves out of their comfort zones is the key to unlocking their true potential as men. If you're ready to take control of your life back and curate a network of successful and knowledgeable men, now is the time to seize the opportunity.
All right, guys, welcome back to another TUA episode. There, the camera's back on. Let's talk about frame and relationships in the long term, power dynamics and the such. I got a whole bunch of notes here. What did I put in the description? Managing frame in a long-term relationship is very challenging and very important skill to master. In today's show, we are diving down the rabbit hole of frame and power in relationships. Lots to talk about today. We'll have time for call-ins. I think I might be able to go a little bit longer as well. Just got to check my messages, but I usually do 90 minutes. Might be do a little bit longer today. So I'll drop the call-in link in the chat. I won't be taking call-ins until I kind of get through my notes over here and do my monologue, but happy to answer any questions around this. Let me just grab the link here. Invite, copy, and here we go. We'll chuck it in here. Call in and ask a Q. All right. And StreamYard link is pinned at the top of YouTube. Boom. There we go. I'll drop it in the live and I'll chat in a little bit just before we take call-ins. So as some of you guys noticed last night, I had to fill in for Moff on ladies' night. I always get lucky with the great panel, right? Yeah, he was going down to Miami and doing some work for the future event that we're doing in Italy, and this guy that's going to be he's a pretty solid dude. It's going to be speaking at the event again this year. Top shelf athlete guy. So I had to fill in, and what was her name? Monique was her name. As people mentioned in the comments, I often read the comments the next morning. She's the kind of gal that sort of runs a relationship, and guys have a very hard time leading. And I think that's the outcome for the vast majority of guys and LTRs is they're not able to lead. They perhaps might start from some sort of position or strength or authority. But like I talked about in my book, The Unplugged Alpha, you guys can pick that up on Amazon. This is a process that there's usually no one single event that shifts the power dynamic, that shifts the frame of the relationship. It's been said that in every relationship, one person enters the other person's frame. And it's ideal for her to enter your frame because, again, women are hypergamous. They want to be with the best they can get. Men prioritize availability. So is she available? Does she respond to me? Does she like me? Does she touch my pee-pee? Basic stuff like that. Women typically prioritize the best that they can get. That's what hypergamy is summed up. So if she doesn't see you as the best that she can get, she'll probably start to shit test you. They're also called competency tests. Can you do that? Why can't you do this? Will you do this with me? Sort of thing, and ask you to do things that you probably don't want to do or don't see relevant or useful or complementary to things that are going on. The problem is that the vast majority of guys, because they like to people please women. There's a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy, which is on my Amazon recommended reading list, which is over on the Entrepreneurs and Cars channel. It's always pinned at the top comment, like all the resources. Whenever somebody goes, "Hey, what book should I read?" That's where you find it. Dr. Robert Glover talks about, like these nice guy syndromes where the vast majority of guys sort of create these covert contracts in their head and they try to please women and they try to do things to sort of like win them over. And I get it. We've all been there. I've done it before, certainly. But it's not what they respond positively to. I think we saw this last night on Ladies Night. You often see it, during the conversations when Moff and Spencer are running the show, but women will often say, guys need to be more emotional and in touch and more sensitive and emotional intelligence. You start hearing shit like this in therapy and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, we've been hearing that stuff for years. And I guess the question that we should be asking ourselves as dudes is, how is that working out for men? How is that working out for you? How is that working out for me? How has that worked out in general? And you come to a realization at some point that until women start responding positively and with enthusiasm to softer, weaker, beta, more agreeable men, you kind of shift your you shift your perspective, you shift the way that you handle things, you sort of shift the way that you deal with relationship conflict and details and the intricacies and all those sorts of things to what works. And sometimes the very things that women don't like or want you to stop doing tend to be good for the relationship. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I don't know if it was on a Zoom call or privately. But I've been uploading these videos since 2014. It's been 11 years now. I'm on my 11th year. I've read every single Evo Psych study that comes up. Whenever a friend says, "Hey, there's this new book that came out. You got to check it out. It's up your alley." Download it and listen to it. I've had lots of conversations. I've probably learned more in the last year than I have in the entire 11 years, if I'm being honest. So most of my perspective remained relatively consistent with some changes. I've got a few notes over here, so you might see some updates to it. But the one thing that I can say with absolute certainty is that most guys are too nice. They're too agreeable. They're too willing to please. And why wouldn't we be that way? Because often you fall in love with a woman and you want to please her. But that's a tragic mistake. That's a bad strategy. Saying yes and agreeing with everything and letting her get away with certain things, which, again, we'll talk about. I made a note over here to talk about a good friend of mine. We're going to call him Larry. I'm going to send this episode to my friend and he'll know that I'm speaking about him. And, we'll compare Larry to your average Joe, 95% of guys out there who we'll call Barry. And Larry and Barry, the only thing they have in common is they're men. They're born as biological men. The biggest difference between Larry and most men is that he only does what he wants to do. Very good friend of mine. Love the guy to bits. If he called me right now and said, I need your help with something, I'd turn off the show and, I'd take care of it for him. He's that kind of guy. But, we've had a number of conversations. We've done a lot of trips together. And, one thing that's been clear about his stance and his position in long-term relationships. And if I'm being honest, he goes a little bit further than probably what he should for a guy that's looking for a long-term relationship. But I don't think he's looking for a long-term relationship. I don't think that fit is there for him just yet. I'm not saying that won't ever be, and I think he's probably the kind of guy that might be open to it. But in the vast majority of cases, saying no to things that you don't want to do is actually a very good strategy. And I think this is probably one of the most important lessons I want you guys to take away from this podcast is saying no. As an example, most of his relationships don't last very long. He meets a gal, witty banter, they get drunk, hook up, and they start having some fun. And maybe they start dating, maybe they start going out, they have dinner, they get together. And that might go for a few weeks to a few months, but it never seems to go any longer than a few months for this guy. And he's okay with that. It usually ends because she starts making requests of him that Larry is unwilling to fulfill. Hey, it's my nephew's birthday party this weekend. We've been seeing each other for 4 months. I think it'd be cool if you came and, hung out for a few hours and, met my family and my nephew and sang him happy birthday and all that sort of stuff. And he's the kind of guy I'd be like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I think I'm going to go do something else instead. So, you go ahead, sort of thing. And that's usually like the pivot point where these women will be like, okay, fine, I guess. And then it just sort of falls apart from there. So that's one end of the spectrum, a very strong end of the spectrum, and a very good position to take if you never, ever, ever, ever want to go through betatization through 1,000 concessions. Because Larry's position is essentially, yeah, I'm never going to do anything that I don't want to do. I remember having this conversation. I've shared the story, probably prior, but I'll mention it again because I know there's a lot of newer viewers to the channel and stuff like that. But I remember dating this gal in my 20s, and I liked her. I just wasn't like, I didn't like her as much as she liked me, if you know what I mean. And she lived downtown Toronto. I didn't really like driving all the way downtown to deal with shit. I rode a motorcycle at that time. There's really nowhere to park it overnight. People downtown are a little more liberal. They're kind of weird. They have these like weird obsessions with funky breakfast places and, stuff like that. But it was what it was. And, we dated for a while, and I never said yes to any of her shit. Literally nothing. It was like, and I think it was because I wasn't as much about her as she was about me. It's not that she was unattractive or a bad person. She was just she was a pleasant kind of like mid, and there would be things that would come up like, hey, I'd like you to meet my grandmother. She's at this home, and, she was so cool, and she traveled the world, and, she even went up to the Arctic Circle, and, look at all these paintings that she did and blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. You can go hang out with your grandmother, if you want to go see her or something like that. Or I remember one of the other things that was contentious for was she had this fluffy white dog. What are they called? Bichons. They're non-shedding dogs. They're absolutely harmless. I don't even think they bark. They're just fluff balls that women like. And I remember there was an event in Toronto, something called Woofstock, if I'm not mistaken, or some shit like that. And I'm like, okay. She's like, yeah, let's go to Woofstock or something like that. And I'm like, what's that? Oh, it's a dog festival. And, there'll be all these cute dogs, and they sell garments and wear and little shoes and stuff like that. And I'm like, nah, no, I'm not going to do that. You go have fun. I'm going to go out with the boys. We're going to ride the motorcycle sort of thing. And that's what we'll be up to. And if there's anything that she invited me to that seemed interesting, like, hey, you want to come up to my cottage, then I probably would have said yes, because that's the kind of shit that I like, sunshine, boats, I don't really like big cities and all the giant buildings and all that sort of stuff. I prefer nature and, decks and cottages and stuff like that. So that obviously didn't last very long for me, maybe like a year or something like that, because I said no so many times to just about everything, which is the better way to do things, if I'm being absolutely honest. If you don't want to do something, don't do it. If you don't see a fit, if you don't see it as a good use of your time, just don't do it. It's not complex, really. I've seen a lot of interviews with very successful people from all walks of life that will often talk about some of the keys to their success. We're talking about business owners, we're talking about entrepreneurs, we're talking about venture capitalists, we're talking about investment sort of guys. And quite often, one of the very consistent trends that you'll hear with them is like, if I get invited to an event or a room and I don't see the benefit to being in that room, like there's not going to be any opportunities, a networking opportunity, a level up, people in the room that I can potentially strike up business deals, make some money from, then I just won't go. And I think that that's a very good strategy to use in business and in life, but also in romance. If you find yourself in situations where you're dealing with women that are asking you to do things that you're not that inclined to be involved with, like, I don't like art, like looking at pictures on a wall, walking through a gallery and going like that. Oh, yeah, okay, that's very nice. And this, that. And you walk around, you go to the next set and people go, it's very nice. It's a pretty cool picture. Sort of, I just like that bores the snot out of me, right? Like I would slip into a coma and want to die. I like fast shit. I like motorcycles, planes, boats, cars. Ask me to go do something that has that level of involvement in it, or something, closely approximating that. but a lot of the times, you know, you'll have women that'll be like, hey, you know, let's go do this, or let's hang out with my couple friends, or it's such and such's birthday party, and we'll sit around. And quite often, you know, you like a chick, you're like, okay. And then you find yourself there and you're sitting in a room and you're like, you know, you don't know anybody. I remember there was a stand-up comic. I can't remember who he was, but he was kind of making fun of like how women set up play dates for their husbands and boyfriends and shit. And it's like, hey, let's go to this birthday or this barbecue or this whatever event. And then, you know, your chick will be like, hey, you know, you got to meet Bob over here because he likes baseball and you like baseball and you guys should talk about baseball. And you're like, let's talk about baseball and shit. And you're standing around talking about baseball like a couple of dorks. And then it eventually moves to like, oh, you work over here and I work over here. And, you know, if you take this route to work, then you're going to shave off like 15 seconds at this intersection by taking this way. And when I use my barbecue, I like to scrape it with a wooden scraper instead of one of the metal brushes. It's like, you know, it's like when your parents would take you to some other parent's house and you'd play with Legos with some retarded kid that you didn't want to ever hang out with. It was like, okay, fine, whatever. That's usually what ends up happening. And it's your inability as a guy managing the frame of the relationship, which is your job. Again, as I remind you, as I talk about in my book, as I keep, you know, having conversations with you guys about, to manage the frame of the relationship and do and be that guy that she's going to want to be with, that she's going to want to look up to and adore, and she sees as her hypergamous best option. And you guys sort of like, you know, roll through those, you know, elements and epochs of life. But like I said earlier, you know, my buddy Larry, he's hardcore. He'll probably at some point find a chick that'll absolutely put up with all that shit, and they'll just be like, oh, okay, I'll just go to the birthday party by myself. Or, hey, you know, Larry, do you want to go to the Woofstock event? And be like, yeah, no, I'm good. And she'll be fine. She'll go by herself, or she'll bring a girlfriend or some shit like that. But a lot of women today will, you know, you can go right back to the betatization thing. That's all that it really boils down to, is they'll systematically, unknowingly do things to you that make you less attractive to them. You know, by the time you start saying yes to shit, you might as well get one of these fucking stamps and just stamp yes, 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 like the yes honey stamp sort of thing. And you're just doing everything. And, you know, before you know it, you're like an accessory to her agenda, her schedule, to her friends' brunch meetings and shit with the cute couple thing. And, you know, you sort of go along for all those rides and you drive her up there in your nice car, and you're a nice, tall, handsome guy that shows up, and they're like, oh, what does this guy do? You know, all these sort of like stories and events sort of ensue. But it's these sequential yeses to everything that you slowly lose the power in the relationship to her. That's how you lose the frame, you know, by constantly agreeing to everything. So be more like Larry. You know, there was this video game that we used to play when we were kids called Leisure Suit Larry. I don't know if you guys ever played it, but it's old as fuck. You used to play it on like PCs. But Larry has something going on there, right? I think if you have to make a decision between doing something, maybe ask yourself, what would Larry do in this situation, right? Would he say yes or would he say no? Now, the problem that most guys have, and I jotted this down, I'm just going to cross this off now, is the key to managing all of this is value and attractiveness. If you're high enough value and you're attractive enough to women, not a woman, I'm saying women, then you'll be in a very strong bargaining position to execute the way that Larry does. It's only guys that are lower on the attractiveness scale and lower on the value scale that start saying yes to everything, because they know that if they don't placate her and if they don't say yes to everything, they might lose her, and they're afraid to lose her. So they agree to Woofstock. They agree to Sunday brunch with random strangers they don't fucking know. They agree to the barbecue and standing around talking to some goof that they don't really care about baseball or some shit that, you know, she thinks that you guys should end up having a conversation about. It's just yes to everything. And when it gets to more complex questions, like let's move in together, or I have a great idea, let's get married, let's have kids, because you've already conditioned yourself to say yes to everything, you continue to say yes. And you don't have the ability to say no or structure it differently. Like, I know lots of guys that are in relationships that are also having kids, or they've got multiple kids, but they absolutely do it on their terms. I think I have my email list ticker on. So if you haven't gotten on my email list, there's a great example of that. I did a hour-long Zoom call with Tristan Tate a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago or something like that. And he was sort of like breaking down how he has multiple relationships and children with all these women and how he sort of structures it on his terms. Because guys at a higher echelons, at a higher caliber, they don't say yes to everything, right? It's like, I like that idea, but here's how I want to do it, right? And if you're her hypergamous best option, she's looking at you as her best option and looks at you as the guy that she wants to adore, sort of thing, then she'll probably say yes. She'll probably, agree to it. It's not what she wants. She may be unhappy about it. It might disappoint her. She may want to structure it a different way, but that doesn't matter. Like I said earlier, sometimes the very things that women want from you, or they want you to stop doing, you doing what you want to begin with, are probably, on a balance of probabilities, on a strong balance of probabilities, actually better for her and the relationship than giving her what she wants, believe it or not. But women will only, I'm going to use tolerate as a word to sort of describe that, but women will only follow that lead or tolerate those boundaries if she sees you as her best option. Your average guy out there that hasn't maxed out on the 7 spokes of a high value man, again, as I talk about in my book. If you're new to the channel, get it. It's on Amazon. You can see it on the top right of your screen. Okay. Make sure you get the 2nd edition. There's another one coming out later on this year. If you're on my email list, you'll get notified of it first. Then it's just easier. The key for all men to getting more out of relationships is 1, increasing their value and their attractiveness, and then 2, knowing how to say no and how to maintain the frame of the relationship and make sure that for the vast majority of it, anyway, she's in your frame, right? And you're not going and doing things that you don't want to go and do. High value man don't do gay shit like go to Woodstock, right? You've got 7 days in your week, 24 hours in each day, and high value guys that are like, I don't see a lot of value in spending 5 hours at this event, will use it doing something else on themselves, improving themselves, doing something that they have in their calendar that needs to get done. I think I might have used this example in the book. I can't recall the details that I gave, but I'll tell you the whole story. I remember I had this gal that I dated, and she had this friend, and you know how like women like to throw like house parties sort of thing, or they get their girlfriends over and they're drinking wine, and they usually bring over their partners. That's the word they use. I'm going to bring over our partner, and it's usually the husband or a boyfriend or some version of that or whatever. And then you sit around, you eat and you drink, and you have a charcuterie board, and there's some fucking music, and you talk about and they all cackle and stuff like that. I remember I went to this one once, and I brought my daughter to it, and there was this lady there who was just awful, just fucking wicked. Talking down to her husband, disparaging men and masculinity in general, making fun of her husband, basically in front of everybody. It was just a bad look. And I was just put off by it, if you know what I mean, for a number of reasons. One, it's like, I don't want to spend time in rooms with people like that. And 2, you don't want your kid seeing examples in life as a small child of how relationships can be. And then they cook up this idea in their head, like, oh, because a lot of the things that your children, your boys and girls that become men and women do as adults are all learned behavior that they see as they're sort of growing up. So I've always made a concerted effort to, if something's bullshit, it's like, that's bullshit, and I'll call it out. Or if there's people that exhibit unfavorable or bad behavior or something that I wouldn't co-sign, I just don't put myself in the room, and I certainly don't put my kid in the room, sort of thing, because you're more intentional about that, right? Because that's your job as a parent, sort of thing. Anyway, so this lady was, just being awful to her husband, and just, in general. And then I got another invite a few weeks later to do another one, and I politely declined and said, yeah, I'd rather pass if so and so is going to be there. So, you guys have a good night. And I just heard an earful of bullshit. Yeah, a real man would that. You know how it is, right? I think Kevin Samuels talked about it, the sign language. What was it? Shame, insult, guilt need to be right. That acronym. And it was like, the standard, a real man would be just like, have fun, click, right? I get an apology a few days later. She's like, yeah, you're right. She's a toxic person. I'm sorry that I gave you a hard time. So it doesn't matter. Like, at some point they might see the way that it is. They might apologize to you, but a top shelf guy lives his life in an unapologetic manner, navigating it in a way that he sees suits his interests, and just doesn't care. And I know some people right now, they're going to be in the comment,
Well, that's not how relationships work. It's about compromise and communication and working on your toxic, unresolved mommy issue.
you know how it is, right? It's the standard stuff. Fuck all that noise. It doesn't matter, because again, if you're a guy on a purpose, you're putting a dent in the universe. You're a good man. You're a kind man. You're not a nice guy. There's a big difference between a kind man and a nice guy. Nice guys get walked all over. Nice guys are people pleasers. Nice guys make covert contracts on their head about, well, if I go to this dinner and I go to this couple's breakfast brunch event or some shit like that, and I go to Woofstock for her, then she's going to reward me with enthusiastic hanging from the chandelier sex like I've never seen before, sort of thing. Guys will, they'll cook up these ideas in their head, if they just give her enough of what she wants. But the truth of the matter is, the more you give her what she wants more often. I put a carbonated water in here with some beet juice, and it's all fucking red. I don't want to get it on my shirts. Give me a second here. The more that you do all of that, the more likely it is that she'll be turned off by you, that she'll cheat on you, that she'll mistreat you in the relationship, that she'll divorce you, take half your shit, and alienate you from your kids. Because women don't leave men that they adore. They don't leave or divorce men that they see as their hypergamous best option, right? So all of this lead up in the relationship, and I keep fucking telling guys this all the time. Like, I have private consult after private consult with guys, and this is a recurring theme, right? It's like, you're going to get out of life what you tolerate. And a long-term relationship is far more work than just spinning some plates and dating women simultaneously in a non-monogamous fashion, right? Because you're not invested in it. You're not ego invested. It's not like you put time into, her family and building relationships and helping them out with shit and all that sort of stuff. And that anchors you, you know what I mean? And a lot of guys will put themselves in a vicious cycle of getting anchored and like tied in to a woman and her network in such a deep way that it makes it hard for them to get out of it until she says, fuck this, I'm out, which is, 80% of the time in divorces. That's a stat. Women untie the knot 8 out of 10 times. So, the risk is real. If you can't manage a long-term relationship, if you can't say no and have her be okay with that, you're probably screwed in the long term. The chances of you getting divorce raped, going through the grinder, being alienated from your kids, having your wealth stolen from you through family courts and distributed to legal professionals and her and all that other bullshit go up dramatically. Systematic yeses to everything will make your life miserable over the long term. Women don't want a yes man. They want a fucking man. And men know how to say no. Let me go through some more of these notes here, because I've already rambled on for half an hour. So in most relationships, men aren't leaders. I think for the vast majority of the ones that I've examined, and sir, I'm going to be very clear about something. Every single one that I've examined that I've had a private consult with, men aren't leading the relationship. They started out usually leading the relationship. There was something there that sort of hooked her in. She really liked him. But through a process of betatization through 1,000 concessions, they give up the frame and the power transitions over to her. And that's the worst thing you can do. You need to maintain control of that frame over the long term. Women don't want to lead. Despite what you've heard, women are strong and independent, blah, 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 blah. Even those women, even those boss girls, they don't want to lead. They don't want to lead. These are the same women that are judges, that are lawyers, they own they're a C-suite accounting professional in a large firm. They're CEOs or executives and shit like that. These are the same women that want to check all of that crap at the door and be dominated in the bedroom. They want to be led in life and everywhere. And not giving her the gift of your leadership is going to end up shifting the power dynamic. You will lose a frame and things will start going downhill very, very fast. There was a talk I think Esther Perel gave talking about desire in a long-term relationship. And she basically drew this very grim picture, a hockey stick. You guys all know what a hockey stick looks like, straight, and then it kind of goes like this. For men in a long-term relationship, desire does go down. I mean, it goes down for both sexes, but it goes down a lot slower. And what she noticed in her practice was that for women, it's like a hockey stick. It starts high and then it just plummets and then sort of stays low like that. And that's happening because guys surrender the frame. They surrender the power dynamic of the relationship. They're not leading, right? And nobody talks about this enough. I don't know why it gets overlooked, or nobody, is encouraging men to say no more often. I think a lot of the messaging that guys get from the tradcon side is just, wife up that woman, stop being, a coward. I mean, that's Jordan Peterson's message, is man up and marry her. You can't just date her. That's not enough. You have to marry her and invite the state into your life. And he doesn't like, I watched his 3-part series on the Daily Wire about marriage. He doesn't offer any fucking useful advice about vetting or, looking for problem women or how to manage the frame in the relationship. His advice it's bullshit. It's, you have to negotiate everything in the relationship, including where you're going to put the scissors in the utility drawer. Because if you don't, then you're going to have problems down the road. And it's like, no, I don't fucking care where you put the scissors in the utility drawer. Doesn't matter to me. These are the things that I care about. And these are the hills that I will die on. Right. So small, nonsensical things you negotiate. And even then you don't negotiate in general. You just do what you're going to do. Like take a lesson from my friend, Larry, right? He just does what he wants to do. I'm not into that. I'll pass. Right. And at some point, these high profile professional gals are like, man, well, I'm going to find somebody else then. And they go from do to do to do, just racking up notches and, becoming much less of an attractive option than the women that don't do that. Anyway, let's keep going through these. All right. We talked about kind versus nice guys. We talked about that. The ability to walk away is important too. We didn't talk about that. There has to be, without overtly stating it, like you're replaceable, there has to be an idea that she can be replaced. If a woman thinks that she can't be replaced, then that's a very bad place to be in. If she thinks that she's irreplaceable, then that's a very bad place to be in. I'm just going to run the ad reel for a minute. I got to have a drink and I got to wipe down this bottle because it's got this beet juice going everywhere. So give me 1 second. I'm going to run the ad reel and I'll be back in like a minute and change. Okay. This episode is sponsored by richcooper.ca. Brothers, if you're like me and take what you put in your body seriously, you're going to want to use the Unplugged Alpha supplement line. An obsession with absorption is what sets this line apart from the others. You want to make sure that you absorb as much of the supplements as possible so you don't end up peeing out expensive urine. My supplement line is made in the United States from the highest quality domestic ingredients, and unlike cheap supplements from China in plastic bottles, mine ship in dark glass bottles to keep your supplements fresher, longer, and won't seep endocrine disrupting plastics into your supplements. Nothing is a hard tablet. Everything is in an easily digested, bioavailable capsule. You can filter all products by their various categories, including testosterone support, estrogen metabolism, fat burning, immune health, sleep support, and performance. Visit theunpluggedalpha.com/shop and use the subscribe and save option over here to get 10% off your supplement order, or use coupon code ALPHA10 for 10% off a one-time order to try it out. Men, if you want to know everything that I know today that I wish my dad taught me in my 20s, join the School of Unplugging. There are over 30 hours of lessons currently, a well-organized discussion board, and weekly Zoom calls held by experts with backgrounds in strength, nutrition, finance, investing, and entrepreneurship, all for one low monthly membership. Visit richcooper.ca and on the courses tab, hit the School of Unplugging and get started here. Guys, make sure you visit my website for my communities, requesting a private one-on-one consultation, or learning about my future events. And don't forget to opt into my email list over here to get my newsletter. Let's get on with the show. All right. Again, the call-in link's pinned to the top of the live stream there on YouTube. It's a StreamYard link. You guys can click that and pop in. I'll start taking questions a little bit once I'm done here. But we were talking about, the ability to walk away. She must know that she's replaceable. And again, you're not being a dick about it. You're not like, oh, you're replaceable, bitch. That's generally not the best way to go about it, although some guys might get there. It's more or less, communicated through your value, through your attractiveness, through your choices, the way that you say no to certain things. So manage that correctly. Optionality and cultivating it is something that a lot of guys abandon in a long-term relationship. People get really worked up when you sort of go down this rabbit hole with them, but I don't care. The truth of the matter is that women want men that other women want. Women want men that other men want to be. And if she doesn't see you as that guy, then that's going to, again, contribute to the decline of the long-term relationship and the shift in the power dynamic. So cultivating that can be done a number of ways. You guys can call and ask some questions on that one. I'm not going to go over extreme details and everything. So we talked about replaceability, optionality. Again, I'll use some sound bites that I used before. You treat her like a celebrity. You're going to treat her she's going to treat you like a fan. If you go through life putting her up on a pedestal, praising her, worshiping her, you see this a lot of the times. And, once you see this, you can't unsee it. You see this a lot of times around anniversaries, Valentine's Days, holidays, wedding anniversaries, birthdays, stuff like that, where on Facebook, I think that's usually the place you see them most often. Guy will write this, he'll post like a whole bunch of pictures of his chick, of either them together or maybe her in a bikini. Some of them just don't make sense. Like posting your woman almost naked to the world, being like, "Oh, she's my world, or she's the best thing." It's like, yeah, way to sell her to other guys. But they'll do this big long post, and she's my best friend, she's my better half. Without her, I'd be nothing. You're the most awesome mom and best friend and partner a man could ask for, and blah, blah, blah. And they tag her in the post. And it's funny because whenever it's something like anniversary, like a wedding anniversary or something like that, you look at their Facebook and it's like a picture of him and the family together, or him and her, or maybe like a cover photo with the entire family. And you click it and you go over to her side and it's like her sitting on the beach in a bikini drinking wine with her girlfriend, sort of thing, with no mention of the anniversary, right? And it's like, oh yeah, you can see that one going downhill. Like there's no intimacy in the bedroom. It's him trying to win her back by putting her up on the pedestal. Again, you treat her like a celebrity, she's going to treat you like a fan. So don't ever find yourself in a position where the worship is that obvious. I mean, you should look at her and be like, yeah, that's beautiful. That's sexy, right? Like, don't get me wrong. You should look at her and have a degree of admiration for her, but it should be much stronger on her side than it is on your side. Because that's what hypergamy is, right? They want to be with the best they can get. So that functionally means that you might end up with a pleasant mid. And that's, I mean, I'd rather have a pleasant mid than an ungrateful, disagreeable, 10, right? That's okay. So that functionally satisfies her hypergamous nature, being able to look up to you and being with a giant, being with a man of higher caliber. It matters. It's going to force a lot of these guys to put themselves in a position where they may not get the hottest, the best, the sexiest, the most youthful, or whatever. It's just what it is. All right, so we talked about leading, satisfying hypergamy. Again, I'll mention this. I jotted this down towards the bottom. I think I mentioned it earlier, but a lot of the times men do this to make her happy, because you're with a woman, you hang out with her. See, because men are the true romantics. Women are all like, I want more romance. You see this shit all the time on ladies' night. Men need to be more romantic. Why are they more romantic? And they don't buy me flowers and stuff like that. And it's like, ladies, we would love for that stuff to work. I would love for that stuff to work as well. I'm like all the other guys out there. We would love for women to see a bouquet of flowers and just melt in our hands and admire us and never look at another man and give us the most enthusiastic sex we ever had, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't work. So men are adapting. We're learning that a lot of the times the very things that women ask for and want or demand, like romance and stuff like that, and flowers and, chocolates and stuff like that, and dancing, don't actually attract you. The Skittles man is an excellent example of that. Chateau Hartiste wrote a great blog that exemplifies it. The Skittles man, long story short, I cover this in a little bit more detail on why it is the way that it is in the follow-up book that I'm writing in one of the chapters to make the point. But the Skittles man basically did nothing for women. And he would do it with every woman that he was dating with, to the point where a lot of the time girls would sit down and compare notes and be like, I really like this guy, and he bought me a bag of Skittles for my birthday. And then the other girl will be like, wait, the Skittles man? I had a guy that bought me a bag of Skittles on my birthday too. Was his name da-da-da? And guess what? It's the same guy. And the Skittles man gets what he wants out of life by not giving women what they want. So as much as I would love to stand here all day and tell guys, just buy her flowers and chocolates and send her Valentine's Day cards and, do all of those, sweet knight in shining armor sort of things, it doesn't work. So you're far better off being a Skittles man, being more like my friend Larry, than you are being fully agreeable and giving them what they want all the time. But again, the key to all of this is your value and your level of attractiveness. The hotter you are, the more valuable you are in the sexual marketplace, the more likely you're going to be able to say, nah, you go to Woodstock and have a good time with your friends. I'm going to do da-da-da with my friends instead. And what's she going to do? Oh, real man would da-da-da. A guy of that caliber is never going to hear that stupid shit. A real man. They just don't. Why would they put up with it? It's like, fuck you, you're replaceable. I'm not gonna be shamed because you want me to go hang around with fluffy doggies. Talked about betatization. And I guess the last note that I have over here is the cost of the relationship, which sort of again ties into the Skittles man. Is a lot of people be like, this isn't possible. How do you do this? That's not real, Rich. You're disconnected from reality, blah, blah, blah. Again, the Skittles man, the more a chick likes a guy, the lower the cost. Okay. The Skittles man gave a bag of Skittles to women. The other guys buy dinner, they wine and dine them, they buy them chocolates, they send them good morning, beautiful. What a magnificent Monday it is today. What a terrific Tuesday it is today. I've literally had women shown me their phone and be like, I got a fucking text from this dork again. I'd be like, what? And you look at it and it's like, have a magnificent Monday, beautiful. Have a terrific Tuesday. Have a wonderful Wednesday. Every single morning there's another fucking bullshit text and they're just like, and they want to throw up on their phone. And I'm the one spending time with them, right? I remember there was this dude that called in on one of my shows once. And this was a perfect example of it. He was like, Rich, I took this gal out for dinner. It was my third date. She seems like a wonderful person. I want to have a relationship with her. And, she's making me wait for intimacy. And, I spent $200 on the dinner. And I realized after I dropped her off, she forgot her jacket in the back of my car. So being the nice guy that I am, it was only 15 minutes away. I turned my car around and I went back to her place to bring her the nice jacket that she left in the car because I'm a gentleman. And then he goes, by the time I got there, there was another dude that was already at her house with his car in the driveway, rearranging her guts inside. So he's the dude that spends all the time and money, is made to wait, buys her dinner so she can take her Instagram photos, that she probably goes to the bathroom and sends a text to Chad or Tyrone and goes, I'm going to get this loser to drop me off in 30 minutes, be at my house at this time because he won't be there. And literally the guy is like pulling in as the other guy's pulling out. And he had to see this himself. And, a man's heart breaks, in a situation like that, because again, you're told to do the right thing. Take her out, open the door, buy her chocolates, buy her flowers, take her dancing, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, again, you ask the Skittles guy what he pays for that. And it's usually nothing. It's tiny. It's a bag of Skittles. That's the cost of him doing business. So when guys are like, that's not how it works, that's not what women respond to. Yes, they do. And you know I'm fucking right because you've seen it at some point and you're coming to the realization now and scratching your chin going, maybe this bald man with a handsome beard is actually right. You're actually coming to the realization that everything that I talk about is true. You know, I get called a lot of things by people over the years. People that watch the show, people that call in, people in the comment, people around me in my life, even women that I've dated. But at some point, they all come to the fucking realization that they can call me whatever they want, but they can never call me a fucking liar. Anyone that has a disagreement, and again, I always make this offer on every show, why don't you just call in on one of my shows? The link is always pinned live with your grievance and tell me what your better solution is to a problem that I've already addressed. But none of y'all will do it because you're all cowards and you don't have a better solution and you know I'm right at the end of the day. So long story short, be the Skittles man. Let's take a look at the comments over here to see if I'm got anything that's worth touching on. Guys, the line is open if you want to call in. If you don't, it's cool. I'm happy to wrap up at this point. Romantic gestures only benefit women. That's correct, my friend. No needing. Yeah. Sell their happiness. Yeah. So, this guy notices it too, right? Supreme, it's all fake when they have their happiness on Facebook. People use, Facebook as like a highlight reel to sort of like showcase and hold out to the public. In many cases, the vast majority of people that I know personally, I don't really use Facebook. I mean, I have an account, but I don't fucking post anything on it because I don't like Meta. I don't like Mark Zuckerberg. I think it's all fake and gay sort of thing. But I mean, a lot of the people that you see posting on Facebook with stories about their marriage, their relationship, whatever, I see the code in the matrix and I'm like, that's a divorce coming. And sure enough, 10 times out of 10, I'm always right. Later on down the road, the knot unties. Dude's like, hey, I saw some of your shit. Can I talk to you? I think I screwed up. I didn't really believe you at first, but now that I've seen some of it, it actually makes sense. And I saw it happen to me firsthand sort of thing, right? Yeah, Commonist says here, many of the problems that men suffer can actually be solved with diet. Being unattractive, it's a burden, dudes. Like being overweight, being unhealthy, being insignificant, being poor, living paycheck to paycheck. A lot of the problems that you deal with in relationships and the crap that you put up with is because you haven't got yourself squared away. Again, women prioritize the best that they can get. Men, our standards are much lower. We prioritize availability. She responded to me when I text her. She touched my pee-pee. Do I get to be intimate with her every once in a while sort of thing? She be my girlfriend. What are we? Let's get married. Let's have a baby together. I'll buy you a house. Let's buy a house together. They run into that sort of stuff, right? Claudia loves Skittles. See? All women love Skittles. Let me see what else we got here. So true. Fake text saying that you have no balls. Yeah. Sorry, just scrolling through a few of these comments here. Yeah. The cute rescue dog. Dogs are an interesting cheat code when it comes to dating, but I mean, dogs are actually wonderful things. It's been said that we don't deserve them. And I understand why they say that. But they're also like, they're going to break your heart. I mean, you're going to outlive them probably. It's like having a 2-year-old toddler around all the time. You really can't go on vacation unless you got somebody that can take care of them. They're fucking a handful. Dogs are great. I find personally, just it's better when they're other people's dogs and they're cool dogs. I don't like useless dogs, like the fluffy white ones that like women often get that don't shed. And they're like, they just sit there sort of thing and look cute. Oh, look at the cute picture. And they put it all over social media, or they have a dog account on social media. I want a dog that can rip off a dude's arm if he breaks into the house, right? Like that's a useful dog. We've got to call in over here. Let's see what SG has for us. Give me 1 second. At the stage, what is up? What do you got for me?
Hey, what's up, Rich? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I've never been live before, so I don't have any background noise or anything.
You're good. What do you got for me?
Hey, I was just curious. you know, me being a single dad and I actually have 5 children. I was in a marriage for 24 years.
Yeah.
You know, I'm back out. Uh, you know, I got divorced and everything like that, but back out dating again. I mean, I know what you say about dating single moms and everything like that. Is still the same thing with me being a single dad with 5 children? Or, I mean, how do you feel
Yeah,
about that?
you know, a lot of the times, I mean, I did this too. Like I went looking, you know, for a relationship after I got divorced, and I found a lot of women when I was out there again or using the dating sites and stuff, had kids, and I figured, oh, you know, whatever. I'm a single dad. They're single mom. Let's give it a try. I saw the Brady Bunch growing up too, right? It seems like that shit
Yeah.
works. Only it doesn't. There's a reason why, and I did a TUA episode in the last month or so, but there's a reason why there's a lot of kids stories and nursery rhymes and stuff like that. Hansel and Gretel, Cinderella. You can go right down the list. There's so many stories of evil stepmoms.
Right.
And it's true. I mean, like chances are they're probably not going to be an evil stepmom. They're just not. They might be, but the vast majority of them, they might start off as being interested in your children, but they're really not. They don't really they're not like men. Men are very easy to adopt and care for other children that aren't theirs. I think that it's certainly a flaw, and I don't think it's a good strategy because you're essentially cuckolding yourself because you're raising other men's children. So it's not a wise choice, but we do it a lot, especially to win over her heart. You know, if she's sexy and hot enough, there's lots of very pretty, you know, single moms out there.
Yeah.
You know, that still look good, still have great bodies, they look after themselves, you know, sort of stuff like that. But it's not really wise for us to invest our resources in raising other men's kids, right? That might be different if the
Right.
kids are older. But typically the advice that I give guys is you're going to have a better time, generally speaking, with a gal that doesn't have kids. She's probably not going to want to invest in your kids though. Like I'm just like, hopefully the children have a good relationship with their mother, let them maintain that. I wouldn't expect any woman that you're dating to step into that role or want to step into that role, but you're going to be better off dealing with a chick that doesn't have any baggage.
Yeah, and I actually don't need a female to actually do that. I mean, my 17-year-old daughter lives with me, but then I have my 12-year-old son that lives with his mom, but the rest of them are, you know, older and moved out, you know, the other three. So, you know, I don't really need a female to step in and do that. But
kids, but they're mostly adults. That's better than not, right? I mean,
yeah,
better than that is no kids, right?
Yeah.
There always seems to be something that's inconveniencing their day or making their life complex that they want to drop on you and make their problems your problem.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's not
I have noticed that.
just sort of date younger and try to avoid that if you can.
Yeah, I guess the other side of that is, so I did start talking to one, but she's, it was funny because I took her out and we had a couple of drinks, but she was like, "Oh, I'm so desperate," and then she kind of pushed me, you know, and told me to stay away from her because she didn't want me to take her somewhere and you know have some sex with her. But I saw her yesterday, and then she wanted to actually go out and have sex, but she's like, "Yeah, I'm so desperate because I haven't had sex in so long." But I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, again, you know, you have to watch the behavior and not listen to the words when it comes to women.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
All right. Yes, sir. Appreciate it, man.
All right. See you, man.
All right. Thank you.
Bye. Yeah. It is what it is. Let's we got a Jack here that's waiting to come in and see what he's got for us. All right, Jack, what do you got?
Hello. Well, I've
Jack,
been watching your stuff for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, just a little bit louder, please.
Yeah. I've been watching your stuff for a while. I've got a lot of good value out of it, so appreciate it. Now, there's like certain points that I don't agree with you. I think, you know, you're never going to agree with someone with every opinion that they have.
Okay.
But like, say, what you were just talking about, say evil stepmoms, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
You have mentioned in other times that there is, you know, you get stepdads that fondle with the stepdaughters. So, you know, as much as there are evil stepmoms, there's still sort of, you know, evil stepdads, and you've admitted to that in that form.
Yeah.
So what's your
Okay, so
response to that?
is that a question or just an observation of the facts?
Well, no. Well, the point that I'm making is that you've said that there's no such thing as an evil stepdad, but then on
Yeah,
other
there's no
times,
such
then you
thing
mention.
in the way that moms sort of do it. Like women will sort of go out of their way to, you know, there's a really interesting Reddit thread. I think it's step parents is what it is. And I believe within the last 2 months, I did an episode on step parenting. And women will go out of their way to inflict damage to, like, I think the one story that stood out when I did that one was there was a lady who was a stepmom to a kid, and she basically created this web of bullshit so the kid couldn't access his video gaming console and Wi-Fi at certain times, and did this in a very underhanded manner. I don't see men doing that stuff. The sort of stuff that men end up doing is that a woman gets divorced, wants to go live her best life, finds a new guy, and she invites him into her life, maybe, you know, her house or something like that, and he ends up spending time with your kids. The greatest risk to your children is a non-blood relative in the house, because the stuff that they do is different than what the stepmoms do. The stepmoms are just, they don't really care about your kids, and they can sometimes do some evil shit. Not in the way that these stepdads will. So you're right. They can cause problems, but I think for the vast majority of cases, what women find is when they find a guy to be a stepdad, he's like the dad that stepped up. You know, he'll take the kids to like practices and pay for shit and buy them a car when they turn 18 and help pay for college. You know, I think the instances of guys doing that do exist, and it is a real threat, but it's not as high as when you get women that are sort of just like not nice to your kids, or they go out of their way to be mean to your kids. Does that make sense?
So you're saying that, so you're saying that it's you think that it's more likely that that a man will end up with an evil sort of mother to his kids versus a woman finding a man that's going to fondle with her kids.
Yeah, so let's put it this way. If there's a stepdad in the picture, there's a risk, and it's a dangerous risk, but the probability is much lower. I think that with stepmothers, there's no real risk in the sense that stepfathers or stepbrothers can pose to your kids over at the mom's house. But what'll end up happening is she'll just be difficult. She'll pull back. She'll get frustrated. She might go out of her way to be evil, or to cut off the Wi-Fi, or not let the kids have access to certain things that they want. Call them brats. It's not harmful at that level, but it's still harmful.
So like more controlling, you mean, on a day-to-day basis rather than.
Yeah, and it really like tears away at the fabric of the relationship. Like you see a lot of these threads on Reddit where it's like step parenting, and they just look like the shittiest relationships ever. It's like, you know, you get these like moms that'll come on. I bet if I open my notifications right now, actually, I mean, I'm going to do this in real time. So here we go. First one that came up: baby mama is ruining my life and mental abuse, or a complete narcissist. Kid does this. Kid responds to mom this. Like it's the standard stuff, right? You know, it's like kind of a lot of complaining about problems that exist in her life with the ex and with the kids, but there's no issues with indiscretions on a sexual level that non-blood relatives will create in a household like that. It's just nagging. It's just constant nagging. It's like low tier bullshit. We don't see Hansel and Gretel unfold in the real world, but there's a reason why. Somebody put it here in the comments about literature. Where was it? Here it is. The evil stepmother is in literature for a reason, right? Like they never wrote this into storybooks for children when it came to stepfathers, right? So it's just more consistent and more annoying.
Yeah, but I think, you know, I get your point, but on the other hand, you know, to paint as if like all men are saints, I don't think that's true.
Yeah, but on the vast majority of cases, most guys are
more
than willing to adopt the children of other men and to help a woman look after them than what women are willing to help a man look after his kids.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
So it does exist.
Then,
I'm not disagreeing with you, and it's a valid point. So thank you for pointing that out. But it just doesn't happen nearly as often.
Right. Fair enough. I mean, I went through a really bad relationship with a sort of narcissistic woman, and I can understand like someone like that, she would be nasty to kids because, you know, that's how they are. They're just self-centered, can't take minor inconveniences and stuff like that. You know, so these types of women are quite detrimental and toxic to, you know, I'm sure you've had many men talk to you about these types of things, these types of women.
Yeah, and you know, all of these problems when it comes to toxic or detrimental or difficult relationships are mostly dealt with in the red flag sort of chapter. It's like, you know, it really boils down to the selection process. So when she shows you who she is and what she's about, and you're a man of greater value and competence, and you have optionality, and you know that she's replaceable, you just don't put up with it. You know, you don't tolerate. It's just like, oh, I saw something that's bullshit. You kind of point at it and you go, that's bullshit. And then you sort of move on from it. And, you know, you take a look at your other options.
Yeah.
So most of it is really in the selection process and vetting them against the red flags.
But I think often people who experience these types of relationships for the first time, it's a very slow process. It doesn't happen overnight normally. So you meet them, they're really nice. They then sort of slowly, you know, test the boundaries, but like very slowly. And it's
believe it or not,
process.
you can actually get there a lot quicker earlier on. Like here's a great example. So if you're using dating apps and you match with a gal, I would, rather than get into, oh, great pictures, what were you doing there? I would recommend getting into something like, so why did you match with me? You know, what about my profile did you swipe right on, sort of thing. And that's starting the frame of the relationship from her entering your frame, complying with, you know, your questions, and sort of demonstrating genuine burning desire or something closely approximating that. And I think a lot of guys will sort of start most of their dating and most of these interactions of like a little too much chasey, a little too much, you know, pedestalizing, praising, you know, doing things to try to win her over, sort of stuff like that. I think a lot of it can start from the get-go. So it really shouldn't take as long as you think as it should. I mean, usually within the first couple of weeks, you should have a pretty good idea just by watching her behavior. Just look at her social media, see how she responds, you know, when you sit down and have a chat with her and you sort of chop it up. All of these things can actually be established pretty quickly. And when you get good at it, like when you legitimately get good at it, you just vet through, you know, stuff that doesn't work for you or it won't work for you quicker because you have more options, you have better options that are coming up, and you're okay with waiting for them because you don't want to deal with bullshit.
Yeah, but I think that is all said, like that's all true. Once you've sort of been through a relationship like that, and then you've got the wisdom and you've sort of realized, like, you know, like you sort of notice the patterns very early on. Whereas like I think a lot of men go through, you know, a lot of people who've probably found your channel have been through some type of relationship like that. And that's why they find you, because they've been through something really bad like that. And they didn't know initially, like they sort of, you know, met the girl, she seemed really sweet, you know, got on with each other, had good sex, whatever it was. And then slowly, once you sort of maybe move in with each other, or some people once they get married, whatever it is, different stages, once the woman feels safe, that's when they sort of flip the switch. And then you start sort of seeing a different version of who they are.
I promise you, she's going to show you what she's about long before you even move in together.
Yeah. No, now that I've been through that experience, I know what to look out for, and you can see that earlier, like sort of the small red flags, like the red flags that you have, you know, your list of red flags. I think that's why it's so important, because a lot of people don't know to look out for those little details that are, you know, for you and for people that have been through these types of relationships, it's like really obvious. But if you haven't been through it, that's exactly why you've made that list, I guess. But another point I wanted to ask you about is toxic masculinity. Sure. So I know I don't know if you've ever, I mean, I've watched quite a lot of your stuff, but I've never really seen you give an answer whether that exists and who.
No, it doesn't exist.
What examples?
What
Right.
So when you hear the phrase toxic masculinity, what that usually means, or where that usually comes from, is from women that are trying to get something from a guy that they're not able to get. So they instead, rather than taking accountability or looking inward or seeing what discrepancies or flaws might exist within themselves, instead of, like, I see this a lot actually. You know, I had this gal on, I think it was a week or two ago, who was a psychotherapist from Bulgaria. You should go watch that show because it's really
Yeah,
interesting.
I saw it.
Yeah. Because I mean, like, she
Yeah.
was doing the whole, guys need to do the work, and why are they ghosting women, and they should deal with their inner demons so they can have a conversation and tell her why it's not going to happen, or they don't pursue them. It's like, men don't owe women shit. And I think that there's an entitlement level that exists out there today from women, where it's like, if they don't get what they want, all they do is they go, oh, he's toxically masculine, or he's got mommy issues, or some nonsense like that. And it's like, no, a lot of the times I find it's just men don't want to be with a woman that, like, maybe they've gone through the red flag list and like, oh, she's got like 4 of the red flags. I'm just not going to deal with it. They identify it and they just ghost her. They don't care. They don't say anything. They don't engage it. They don't see the point. And then, she goes out there at some point and gets therapy, or some therapist comes on, or they tell their friends, or you see like a post somewhere on social media online. It's like toxic masculinity. Like, all that exists is masculinity. There's varying degrees of masculinity. I mean, usually the guys that they point at and say that's toxic masculine are the very same guys that will go to war and dodge bullets, that will carry people out of burning buildings, that when the floods come, they carry the mother and the children away from the dangerous flood waters. The same people that are in coal mines getting the mines that are creating the electricity that they enjoy on their iPhone, where they can swipe on guys. Working on roofs, fixing the shingles, for their leaky roofs on the oil rigs. They're doing all these dangerous jobs, these masculine, competent men. But when they don't get what they want from these guys, they start calling them toxic. Oh, it's toxic masculinity. It's like, that's just a load of bullshit. That's just a bunch of women that aren't getting what they want, that are using sign language. Shame, insult, guilt need to be right, to try to persuade or manipulate that behavior. So don't fall for the whole toxic masculinity thing. It's a load of crap.
I mean, to be fair, personally, that's another point that I don't agree with, and I'll tell you why. Because I think just as much as there's sort of the feminist movement, right? Sort of toxic feminine, basically, right? It's a toxic woman who's gone to the extremes of sort of trying to become, more powerful than men and all that sort of stuff, right? Which is, it's not healthy, and it doesn't help anyone. As much as that exists, I think, in my opinion, that the other extreme of a man that sort of tries to be almost like, let me ask you, do you think a toxic boss exists of a business?
No, I think shitty people exist. I mean, there's probably toxic relationships, but I don't believe that toxic masculinity exists.
So you mean that term of toxic masculinity, but do you think a toxic man exists?
Sure, but let's go to AI. So let's settle the grievance this way. So I'll go to Grok and I'll say, define toxic masculinity, and let's see what it comes up with, right? Because it's going to scour all the data. Toxic masculinity refers to cultural norms and expectations around masculinity that promote harmful behaviors or attitudes, such as here it is. This is where it kicks off. Such as suppressing emotions, right? This is where you get women that are like, oh, you have to emote more, you have to be softer, I want you to cry on my shoulder, sort of thing. And it's like, women say this gay shit and then they go off and fuck Mr. Exciting with a bag of Skittles, right? So this is exactly the sort of stuff that I'm talking about. Like, toxic masculinity is defined as suppressing emotion, prioritizing dominance. What? Like being dominant, being a fucking man, like leading the relationship, saying no, like a lot of the stuff that I talk about in the show, right? Prioritizing dominance, aggression, which is natural in men because high testosterone creates that, control, like all of the natural, strong masculine traits that women admire and love in a man. Suppressing emotions, being aggressive, being dominant, controlling the situation. These are just conventional masculine behaviors that they're labeling as toxic because they want these guys to be more feminine or vulnerable. This is exactly what it says. Associated with not being feminine or vulnerable. It often pressures men to conform to rigid stereotypes like being stoic, independent, sexually assertive, and can negatively impact mental health. This is where the shit gets weird. Relationships and society. The term critiques these patterns, not men, as individuals or masculinity itself. So basically, what it boils down to is building a better beta. So what women want is they want guys that they can fucking control. And when they can't control them and they're not able to build a better beta, they're like, that's toxic masculinity, right? Because it sounds like when you put toxic on something, it's like toxic dump of shit. So it's like that guy is toxic sort of thing. And for the vast majority of times where somebody calls a guy toxic or toxic masculinity, people call me toxic masculinity all the time. And I just fucking laugh because it's like, you got nothing, dude. You don't even know me. You don't know my relationship with my daughter. You don't know how I roll with women that I'm with. Like, you don't know. But because I don't give them what they want, or I don't tell them what they want to hear, or I'm not reciting the shit, like a lot of the stuff that women say online, again, it goes back to building a better beta. They want guys more compliant. They want guys more agreeable. They want guys that they can manipulate better. And then when you don't fall into their frame and toe the line, they're like toxic masculinity, right? That's generally what it means. So on that one, my friend, I'm sorry, you're wrong. I'm right.
I mean, I understand your point. I think it's all on a spectrum because, if we go back to the example of a boss, for instance, of a business, right? If you have a boss that, obviously a boss always needs to hold a certain standard, right? That his employees know that
right,
he's
but boil
the
it down to
business.
this. So whenever you would call a boss toxic, it's usually because you're not getting what you want from them, right?
No. I've seen, a toxic boss, I'd call a toxic boss. This is what I would call it. Obviously everyone can have their own opinion, but in my opinion, someone who's doesn't engage with his employees properly, is very critical the whole time, as in always focuses on the negative and doesn't focus on much positive. Someone who doesn't reward their employees if they do well. Basically someone who's going to they're someone who's going to drain their employees, and they're going to have a high turnover of employees.
Right, but I mean, everything that you said there really boils down to the employees not getting what they want from their employer, which is the exact same thing I was talking about earlier.
That's the same as if you have a horse. That's the same. If you have a horse, you have to feed a horse, right? It's not going to run for you if you don't feed it.
Yeah,
so you have to work with what you've got.
Jack, what you're missing here, though, is that it's assholes that get things done in the world, right? Like just about every employer that I've ever worked for, and whenever I've been an employer, I've been called an asshole. I've been called whatever, like under the sun. But it's like, at the end of the day, you're the employee. I'm the employer. I get to say how things go, and I'm sorry if you don't like it. That's just the way that it is, right?
Yeah, but I think it's on a spectrum.
Doesn't change that reality.
It's on a spectrum, though, because there's different. You could say someone's 80%, 90%. It's not like someone's either a boss or not a boss. Even a boss can be on different levels of extremity of how much they exert their power over their employees, and how much they work with them, how much they give to them, how much they don't give to them. And in that regard, I think the same can happen in a relationship. A relationship is, a man can be a man. He can still hold that position. Yeah. But there's a spectrum within that. What percentage is he holding? Did you watch the show from the
get-go, or did you sort of like drop in sort of halfway through?
I dropped in about halfway through this show in particular.
You want to go back to the beginning, because I mean the whole point of the show is talking about relationship dynamics and how men lose frame, and what you're trying to do is complicate your life and justify why by saying there can be a degree of toxic masculinity. There can be bosses that are just assholes, and on a balance of probabilities, the vast majority of men, and I would even include you in that group, are too nice. You're too agreeable. You're too willing to give women what they want, when you should probably be saying no more often, and being firm about it.
I don't agree with that, to be honest. I may come across that way, but that's not how I behave. And I've actually built up a business where I'm bringing in over $500,000 a year. So I've managed to do that with working with my employees.
I bet if I were to survey your staff, I'd probably find some staff that would say Jack's a dick.
I mean, you can't please everyone. I'm not talking about pleasing everyone.
So let them call you toxic masculinity then, right?
No, because that's what I'm saying. It's a spectrum. It's not like a this or that. Like it's not either this or that. It's sort of, do you have 80% of the employees saying that you're a dickhead, or do you have 20%? Do you know what I mean? And that's
this
big
is what
difference.
this is what I get criticized for. They're like, Rich, not everything is black and white. Okay, fine. There's a spectrum, but if you define things a lot more clearly anyway, you can sort of move through decisions and choices and environments and relationships and women and employees and all that sort of stuff that much quicker. Trying to move them from the extremes like the black or white into the gray area, I don't think that really serves you. Now, I hope it works out for you. For me, maybe I'm a little bit older than you, I don't know, but I've experienced enough of life where it's like, when I share these experiences and these stories, and this comes from my own personal life, this comes from the guys that I've dealt with, the private consults, and all these calls that I've had over the years, I think the vast majority of men shoehorn themselves into an area where it's like they let women try to build a better beta. And for the vast majority of those men, again, shifting over the other side of the spectrum and being a little bit more of an asshole and being a little bit more disagreeable and being able to say no more often, and looking at her and saying, thinking in their head, like, you're replaceable, I don't need to put up with this, or they don't want to go to a certain event and saying no to stuff like that. I think that shift from that one side to the other is better than shifting into the gray area that you're talking about.
I mean, I understand, because I think, you sort of, or people in general are going to look at the most successful people in the world are normally dickheads, like you say. And
it's assholes that get things done in the world.
Yeah, that's true. But on the other hand, the question is that really, like, does that really, ultimately we all want to be happy. Like, that's if someone would just give you a pill that makes you happy.
That's like the feminist utopia that people want to exist.
No, I'm not saying that's possible.
We'll just take everything and distribute it equally, and everybody will have their share, and everyone will be happy. And it just doesn't work that way.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that most people want to be happy, right? And they think happiness comes from being the top in society, right? Mm-hmm. I don't agree with that. I don't agree that the happiest people are the people that are at the top of society. I think that, in my opinion, they normally rise there because they're sort of trying to chase happiness. It's this constant pursuit of happiness. They never get happy, never get satisfied, and they always want more. And really,
well, being happy is being content with what you have, isn't it?
Right, but then you won't reach to the top if you're content with what you have. It's the people that aren't content with what they have that reach to the top.
I don't think happiness and achieving the pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy of needs are the same thing. I think there's lots of people out there that have a regular job, that work 9 to 5, have a pension. Maybe they're a professional, they're a police officer, a firefighter, that just find themselves happy. Happiness is finding yourself content with what you have. I mean, now we're talking about something totally different.
Exactly, but the point that I'm making is that you're sort of saying that the assholes get things done. At the end of the day, that doesn't mean that you need to become that just because that's what they get done. It does. Ultimately people want to be happy. So if that's not really going to get you to the pursuit of happiness, it's not going to.
If you try to make everybody happy, Jack, you're going to find misery.
No. I'm not talking about making myself happy. I'm talking about ourselves. But you're sort of coaching people, right? You're telling people, sort of almost telling people, become more of an asshole, let's say, right? So that you can get shit done.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does getting shit done make you happier, or what's the point? What's the end goal of getting shit done?
What's the end goal of getting shit done? Is accomplishing things.
And then what?
I don't know. It could be any number of things. You could want to build a business. You could want to move somewhere. You could want to build a house. It could be any number of things.
Ultimately, that's because you think it's going to bring you happiness.
No.
I could tell you, I told you I make $500,000. Once I reached that, and I was like, I went through a time in my life when I was depressed, and I was looking at my bank account, and I was like, what's the point of all of this?
Well, I mean, they've already proven that anything after about 80, 90,000 or so doesn't make you any happier.
That's what I'm saying. So you reach these goals.
But hang on a second. What it does, though, is that it creates more options for you.
Yeah, I'm not complaining that I have that money. I'm just saying that it doesn't, in and of itself, make you happy. And I think we're led to believe that more money in your account is going to make you happy. We're sort of
that's not what I said.
It's a lie.
In fact, I've agreed with you. The research absolutely agrees with what you're saying. After a certain line in the sand, more money doesn't make you any happier, but what it does is it creates more options. It can solve more problems for you. And that in itself can make life easier. It can give you more options, the ability to maneuver. I mean, we started
Yes, I'm not
talking about
saying.
toxic masculinity. I'm not sure how we got to happiness.
Well, because we're talking about the people that reach to the top. That's why. And then the point of reaching to the top, people
So-
want to reach the top because they're on an endless.
Okay, so let me just
pursuit of
circle back
happiness.
so I can be clear here. So what was your grievance at the get-go? There were some things that you said that you didn't agree with me on. You said that you agree with most of it, but not certain
Yeah,
things. So-
yeah. So these 2 points mainly were, the first one that I mentioned was that evil stepdads do exist, which you
Okay.
say doesn't.
Okay, which
Number
I agree
one.
with
Number
you on.
two, pardon?
Which I agree with you on. It happens disproportionately smaller, but when it happens, it's a greater problem. So yeah, so
Okay.
you're right about
Yeah.
that.
So yeah. The second point is that, I mean, maybe we shouldn't use the term toxic masculinity because I think you have a negative connotation with what that means. But does a toxic man exist? Does a toxic man in a relationship dynamic exist? I say yes. Just as much as a toxic boss exists, just as much as, even if you have a certain position, you should still, there's a spectrum within that position.
Are
that you
there
can
toxic
sort of-
people? Yes, I agree with you. Is toxic masculinity an appropriate term to label men with? Absolutely not.
Yeah,
What
no,
it,
the
what it usually
feminists who
boils
use
down
that
to is
term
women not getting
willy-nilly.
from the men that they want to be with, so they just shame them.
I mean, the feminists that use that term willy-nilly, I don't agree with their definition of it, because they're just calling anyone. It's like nowadays they call anyone who has, right-leaning position, you're far
Yeah.
right, all that nonsense.
Anytime you hear a woman use the term toxic masculinity, get curious about it and ask some questions like, well, what do you mean about that? Can you explain what you mean by toxic masculinity? And what it usually will boil down to is what you'll find is they're trying to build a better beta that they can control, but they're not able to. And that particular man is setting boundaries that they don't like. That's really what that whole ecosystem of toxic masculinity really boils down to. So I don't you hear these fucking women going on about toxic masculinity, but masculinity, the guys that they're pointing to that they're calling toxically masculine, sure fucking come in handy when there's a flood, when there's a war, when there's a house burning down, when we need oil, when we need coal, when the fucking, the sewers go down and the guy puts on the full suit to go down swimming through the shit to fix whatever's down there. Toxic masculinity comes in handy then. And that's the problem that I have with it. It's like a lot of these fucking women that are pointing at guys calling them toxic masculinity, all it is that they're trying to get something from that guy that they're unwilling to give them, and they're setting a boundary, saying no, and they're trying to build a better beta, and it's not working for them. So they make up some bullshit term and they're like, that's toxic masculinity. That's all that is.
Yes, I agree with you for the most part. When women say that, it's bullshit. I agree with you. But I don't agree with you on the part that it doesn't exist at all. I think to say that there's no toxic men out there,
why are we splitting hairs on this?
In my
though?
opinion, is not true. That I think.
Why do we even care though? Like, why are we splitting hairs on it?
No, because otherwise, if you're just saying a statement that it doesn't exist, then you've got no line of saying, right, this man, his behavior is not okay. He's behaving in a bad way, and that's not accepted. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, you're sort of giving
as
a
you
green
pointed
flag
out,
to
there
every
are
man.
gray areas, but I deal on the strong balances of probabilities that occupy probably 80 to 90% of the categories that things fall in. There's always spectrums. So you want to put it in the spectrum somewhere and say there's some toxic masculine male, I say, fuck that term. It's a stupid term. They can shove it. They can stick it in their ear.
Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, yeah, I think, it's because I watched the ladies' night as well, and you get a lot of women on there that sort of leaning towards that way, which society sort of creates these types of women nowadays. It's this mind virus.
That's why I'm telling guys, set boundaries, stop tolerating this nonsense. Like, guys will like, how do we fix all this? Why is this such a problem? How do we improve women? It's like, stop pandering to their fucking bullshit. Stop it. Stop listening to this dumb toxic masculinity narrative. Stop listening to, the vast majority of the lies that they purport. And it's like, if you stop pandering into it and stop like the vast majority of women that you see on ladies' night have never been told no. They've never had a guy that said, that's bullshit, and they've been told no, and they just don't hear it. And that's why when a guy like Moff or me comes on and we tell them something different, they throw a fucking hissy fit. I don't know if you watched the one last night, but this chick lost her fucking mind, and then she called me a misogynist, and I said to her, okay, can you define misogyny? And she couldn't. And she's bragging about her fucking degree on the wall and how smart she was, but she couldn't define misogyny, right? Like, it always comes back to this point where it's like, I can't get what I want, so you're a bad man. They'll call you toxic masculine, they'll call you misogynist, they'll call you whatever, and they don't even know what it means.
Yeah, I did watch last night, and I saw that part. I mean, but you know, I think you're coming from. I agree with what you're saying. The thing is,
I know that I don't get it all right, Jack, all of the time, but for the vast majority of the cases, I promise you, I'm closer to the truth than the people that are debating me.
I agree, and that's why I like watching you.
Thank you.
I'm not, you know, I'm coming here. You tell people to call in to challenge you, and that's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah, let's chop it up, man. Hey, I want to have more of these, you know, contentious conversations with people, because I want to hear from the other side, and it's like, I want to understand the reasoning that you're using, and I understand what you're saying. Like, there's a gray area that exists that's not always black and white. And yes, I get accused of that. I am not a god, as Deborah just pointed out in the chat. I'm a man, and I will get things wrong, but I'm right more often than I'm wrong.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I watch you. As you know, I'm sorry if I've come across like I'm attacking, you know, coming in like I just thought that's what you want. You want to have someone challenge you.
No, you're absolutely fine. I'm happy to be challenged. Like, this is a good challenge. So, you know, for those of you watching, you want to challenge me on something. Again, you know, my answer is always, what's your better solution? So I'm gonna close with this, Jack. So what's your solution to this problem? Like, what's a better way to handle it?
Which problem are you referring to?
Whatever one you want to tackle, my friend.
Well, no, it wasn't a problem. I was just saying I disagree with your opinion. That's all. It wasn't like a problem. It was just more. I mean,
so it's just a disagreement.
I don't know how. Yeah.
You think I'm mostly right, but I'm not 100% right.
Yeah, and you say call in to challenge you because you want people to challenge you, and that's what I did, because I didn't agree with you in these areas. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to do it. And yeah, I mean, the only thing I could say maybe you could help with, well, I mean, you know, on some level, is that women nowadays are very different than what they were back in the day. And with all this bullshit that they're being fed, you know, it's easy to say don't accept it, and I agree with that point, because you shouldn't. But on the other hand, you know, they're fed this like this shit from a young age. They're like reared up with it. You know, what are you meant to do? Like, how are you meant to find a good, pure girl or whatever? You know, a girl that's actually not saying they don't exist, but they're very far and few between. You know.
Yeah. It's just like digging for gold. Like I've always said, sometimes you got to dig through a lot of dirt to find gold, and you're going to go through it, and that's just the way that it is, and you have to accept it.
Fair enough.
Cool. All right, Jack. Thanks for popping in.
It's good to speak to you.
All right. Cheers. All right. So that was good. Again, you know, if you guys have a disagreement, call in. I'd like to hear like a stronger, you know, disagreement, so that we can go right to, okay, so what's your better solution to the problem that I've addressed? You more or less agreed. You just wanted to see more of a gray area, you know, discussed. But I mean, the problem with that is I don't want to do a 6-hour fucking podcast. I don't want to examine all the potential, you know, small intricacies and the carve outs and like the exceptions to the rule. The way that I handled it basically is, yes, there's exceptions to every rule, but an exception to a rule doesn't disprove a rule, right? I think on a balance of probabilities, you know, if there's purple lizard people that come to Earth and, you know, devour you whole and are raising the fucking planet, extracting resources, you can pretty much assume that if you run into a purple lizard person, they're probably not going to be good for you, or to be around. You want to sort of avoid them. So, you know, it's like going back to the argument of not all women are like that, like Nawalt. You know, this has been a long time trope. I think the MGTOW sort of created this like a decade ago plus. Because I mean, you'd go and say something, and then like, you know, like some woman will come and be like, well, not all women are like that. And it's like, sure. But an exception to the rule doesn't disprove the rule, right? So there's that. Anyway, fun show. Thanks for watching. Moff, he's got a scheduled event for tomorrow for office hours, so you should check that out. We'll be back next Monday. Lots more stuff going on. Guys, visit my website at richcooper.ca. supplements, coaching, all the stuff, the events, my community. Get involved. You know, a lot of guys are like, you know, I want to get more out of life and I want to do this, that, and the other thing sort of stuff. And it's like, if you want to level yourself up, we have the school, you know, the School of Unplugging. So it's $50 a month. It's dirt cheap. You don't like it, just cancel after a couple of months if you don't find that there's enough value there. I think for the vast majority of guys that are in it, plus getting the group Zoom calls that I do regularly are getting a ton of value. So don't skip out on an opportunity to level yourself up. Of course, got the community. If you guys want to test yourself, we're taking 32 guys up to Algonquin in about a week and a half, 2 weeks time for a deep immersion in the woods for a hero's journey. We'll share the details of that when we get back. But yeah, get involved in the content, and you guys have an amazing day. So, all right, guys, if you enjoyed that podcast, make sure you visit my website at richcooper.ca to learn more about my courses, my book, The Unplugged Alpha, community, or booking me for private coaching. Also, if you are a Canadian with $15,000 or more of credit card debt and what you are doing right now isn't paying off the balances, then visit totaldebtfreedom.ca and hit get a free quote to see if you qualify to settle your credit card debt for less than you owe today over the next 48 months. Make sure you check out the top pinned comment on YouTube for all the links mentioned during the show. Peace.